Welcome to a night of total terror.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its
You
time.
must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotion.
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all time.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
First came the night, then came the dawn. Now comes the most eagerly awaited day in horror film history.
Welcome back to Thursday of the Dead, episode 144. My name is Jace. This episode is focused on the movie theater ads for Dawn of the Dead, where and when it played here in Sacramento in 1979. I've been a fan of horror movie ads in newspapers for pretty much as long as I could read. Back then, it was the only way I would know what movies were coming and what was playing in theaters near me. I've talked in previous episodes about how during my training for working at the Sacramento Library, I learned that all library card holders had access to the Sacramento Bee archives, which are searchable by keywords and go back at least 100 years. I raised my hand during the training on the newspaper archives and asked, can we search for titles even in ads, like movie ads? The answer was yes. That moment led me on a strange path that's related to this episode. My first search, of course, was for Dawn of the Dead. I wanted to see the old ads and to see where it played in 1979. My dad and I watched Dawn of the Dead at the Coliseum Theater in San Francisco in 1979, then moved to Redwood City briefly, then to Sacramento around 1980. The ad that caught my attention was this one, which showed that Dawn of the Dead played at the Tower Theater in Sacramento in 1979, which happens to still be an operating movie theater. I got a crazy idea. I looked up the corporate contact for the Tower Theater and asked if I could film something there for an episode of what was then called Dawn of the Dead Thursday, and now called Thursday of the Dead. In my initial message, I mentioned that I might be interested in screening Dawn of the Dead there. It was kind of a way to get me the okay to film there. I got a response that I could film there as long as I showed proof of liability coverage for $1 million. I ran into this problem back when I was filming a feature film many years ago. Luckily, I had a friend who had a company, and he told me that he could get a policy that would cover the time I needed for next to nothing. He got the policy, sent the insurance forms to Tower, and suddenly something clicked in my head. I had contacted New Amsterdam Entertainment many years before about licensing costs to show Dawn of the Dead. Back then, it would have had to been a 35mm print, which I didn't have. I contacted them again and pitched it for what it was, a 40th U.S. anniversary screening of Dawn of the Dead in one of the theaters that screened Dawn back in 1979. I didn't have any contact with the owner of New Amsterdam Entertainment, who's Richard Rubenstein. Richard Rubenstein produced Dawn of the Dead as well as many other classic George Romero films. Instead, I dealt with his assistant at the time, Akiko, who was very nice and helpful in our dealings. I thought at that moment that I'd have to track down a 35mm print and rent it for the screening. As a former collector of 35mm film, I wasn't sure how that would work. I'm sure I'd have to get the print insured, as film projectors can be a bit rough on film prints depending on how many times they've been shown and how they've been stored. I learned that the licensing for the film meant that New Amsterdam would supply a DCP to the theater directly. DCP stands for Digital Cinema Package. It's basically a hard drive that's sent to the theater with the digital files for projection. I learned that New Amsterdam was only licensing the 3D DCP for Dawn of the Dead for screenings. I was more than happy with that, as I'd never seen the 3D version. In fact, I still haven't seen that version. I really want to. In my communications with the projectionist and the corporate contact at Tower, I found that renting a DCP would be no problem at all. The issue was the 3D aspect. The projectionist wrote in an email, "This theater doesn't show 3D movies," which is funny because I'd watched a couple of movies in 3D there in the 80s and 90s. Times change, I guess, but he gave me some important information in that email, which I forwarded to New Amsterdam Entertainment. I wrote to them, "I understand that the theater won't show 3D films, which is a shame because I really wanted to show this movie in this theater." Akiko wrote, "Let me see what I could do on my end." With that, I thought, oh well, it was a good try. My thought of screening Dawn of the Dead at the Tower Theater was done. My mind had moved on to other things. Akiko wrote back a couple days later saying that New Amsterdam is willing to make a one-time exception to screen Dawn of the Dead in 2D. Wow. Now it's time for me to sign the contracts and pay for the licensing fee. I was informed that the DCP would be sent directly to the theater. Now that the ball was rolling, I had to scramble to come up with the funds to rent the theater screen at the Tower. The licensing fee was pretty brutal. I think it might be one of the more expensive films to license right now. I found out that the DCP for Dawn of the Dead would be a 2K restoration of the film, and that excited me. As many times as I'd watched Dawn of the Dead, I'd really only watched it once at the theater back in 1979. I live relatively close to the Tower Theater, so I walked the check for payment over one night, and I spoke briefly with the projectionist while I was there. He asked me, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "It's my favorite movie of all time, and I have a weekly show based on it. Also, it's the 40th anniversary of the US release, and it played in this theater in 1979. He seemed surprised by that. I had technology on my side with my access to the Sacramento Bee archives. You may see more ads from different zombie movies in future episodes. I've been gathering what I can find, which is slow but interesting work. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for an upcoming announcement for my next screening at the Tower Theater in what is now known as the Thursday of the Dead film series.
Music and Monsters is proud to present the music of Night God, which is available now on all your favorite streaming platforms such as Apple Music and Spotify. Please visit nightgod.com for more information.